everybody, welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. I'm Matt.
And I'm Tim. And today we're bringing you 6 columnar trees to use in your garden. Now, columnar plants are amazing. I mean, the garden's ever shrinking. Columnar plants allow you to put a lot more plants in smaller spaces.
I think one of the most commonly asked questions we get are columnar plants. It's so heavily sought after. Everybody is losing garden space, like Tim's saying. They're looking for that narrow plant that's going to fit in there, give them a little bit of height, but not the width.
Now make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our weekly emails on MrMaple.com. And some of these may be available right now. Some may be coming to a 10 at 10 near you. So check out these columnar plants.
We're going to dive into it. We've got a diverse mix here today. First up on the table, we've got Twombly's Red Sentinel. Now this is a Japanese maple that's going to give you a very columnar habit.
I love Twombly's Red Sentinel because it's so narrow, columnar, and it gives you some red color in that small space. I mean, this is a plant that'll get 8 to 10 feet in height by about 2.5 to 3 feet in width in 10 years. So it stays fairly narrow and compact in its habit and gives you some bright red spring color, some deep maroons during the summer, and some bright reds in the fall.
Now, a great tip for keeping these columnar, buy plants that haven't been topped back a lot. You want this one to have a central leader to it. Keep that central leader growing. You're going to create a taller plant. Also, putting these in sun is getting them a far narrower shape. In heavy shade, they can go in search of light and get a little bit wider. So you want ones that have been grown in sunlight and not topped back a lot. You're going to get a great columnar plant. Now, this one brings some of the most unique habit to the table, this one being a bright red. So you're going to get that bright red color on a columnar plant, and it really shows out in the landscape. Not only does it hold that deep maroon very well throughout the spring and summer, this one gets to a bright cherry red in the fall as well.
Now, if any of y'all have seen our video on Capershi Dwarf that's shot at Hillstone Arboretum, right beside of it, we have a Twombly's Red Sentinel. And that's packed up right along the driveway. And the great thing about it is it doesn't get very wide. And right there against that rock work, it still gives you some really nice red colors to provide contrast against the other plants that we have there in the garden. So it's a great way to add that color in those small, tight spaces. And it doesn't shoot out a lot of horizontal branching, which makes this tree an ideal candidate for adding color in small spaces where you can have something that grows taller, but not very wide.
Yeah, this one was found by Ken Twombly. You'll see it as Twombly's Red Sentinel is the correct name. Sometimes sold in the trade just as Red Sentinel. Same plant, but we do give homage there to the original namer there and call it Twombly's Red Sentinel. Beautiful tree for the landscape. Easy to grow. This one's going to work zones 5 through 9 and really just give you a nice, compact, narrow, dark red accent. This was found as a broom, and often brooms will be a small, compact ball. Check out our What is a Witch's Broom video. This one turned into a nice, narrow, taller plant. So you're still going to get everything you love about a Japanese maple, but in a nice, thin setting.
Yeah, when I talked to Ken Twombly, it was exactly what Matt was talking about. He said, we found this witch's broom, we were evaluating it, and after years of evaluation, we looked at it, and it looked like a red sentinel standing there. And that's where he got the name of Twombly's Red Sentinel. I've seen some people use it as a hedge, which is really cool, as having a Japanese maple hedge that stays fairly narrow, so it's not going to take up a lot of room, but it's also something that is very unique and different because it provides a lot of bright red color.
There's a lot of great uses for columnar plants. You can use them as screening plants. You have to have more of them to have them tighter together, but they're excellent to use for a hedge or as an accent plant there in the landscape.
Also, a great way to use columnar plants is as foundational plantings towards the corners. They really do a great job of ending a garden or starting a new garden on the other side.
I've seen some of these used in very unique formal English gardens as kind of columns going into the garden. I've seen that done excellently with Twombly's Red Sentinel and a few of the others we're going to be talking about here today.
So next up, we've got Thuga occidentalis DeGroot Spire. Now this is a plant we've got on our bank here at Mr. Maple, and all the customers for years and years would come by and beg us for the plant, but we didn't have it in production. And so it took a while for us to get it in production, but it's one of our favorite narrow evergreen columnar plants that we do. Oh,
it's awesome. It looks great year round. It's the perfect accent. There's also some great pictures we use of this at Dr. Criticos' home. He uses them as accents on each side of his house there, and he has columns going into his house, and it just makes the perfect accompaniment to that. I can't think of this one without thinking of Baby Groot. So when I see this one, I think I'm the Groot. But awesome plant to be grown roots really easily, so it's easy to produce from, but it makes an awesome pillar there in the landscape.
And this is a plant that'll get 6 to 8 feet tall in 10 years by only about 2 foot wide. I mean, it stays extremely narrow. It is a slower grower than something like an emerald green, so it fits in a lot of small spaces. And actually a more manageable plant. If you're going to use this for a screen, you can make sure you give it plenty of time because it is a slow grower, but it's also a plant that if you put it out there as a screen, instead of taking, you know, the 6 to 8 foot that a emerald green might take up, you're going to only be taking up about 2 foot of your yard. So it definitely uses a much smaller space.
Great way to put this next to driveways. You know, we have it in an area where you can still drive big trucks down the nursery and they're not hitting this. It's giving us that columnar habit. It's giving us some texture in there, but it's something that's just going all vertical. We're not getting a lot of width to it at all, which makes the perfect plant on that bank. We have one on a bank. You can put this in so many different ways, especially focal point plantings. That's one of the easiest ways to use this.
Now, one of the things we didn't talk about on columnar plants in general is how well they can be used out in the landscape and garden to add vertical interest. I mean, in a conifer garden, this one is so narrow, it just looks like a straight up habit.
And you're not going to be shading out your other conifers either.
Yeah, it's going to give you some really nice interest out there in the garden and just draw your eye vertically to actually see more things out there in the landscape.
So next up on the table, we have Acer palmatum sucasa silhouette. Now this is an excellent one from Japan. We actually have a whole video on this. You may have seen it. You may have not. It didn't get a lot of views, so don't make us cry. Go watch the video on sucasa silhouette after this video.
Now sucasa silhouette is a selection by our friend Yutaka Tanaka at Sucasa Maple. And his nursery's name is Sucasa after his father's name. And sucasa silhouette, it just makes that nice narrow habit. And our friend Don Shadow, who's a plant legend, actually recommended him putting the name Silhouette on it because of that narrow shape.
Yeah, awesome plant. With the video we did on it, it was actually being used as a street tree because this tree is remarkably durable. You can put this in a lot of sun, zones 5 through 8, full sun. You know, zone 9, you're going to want to give it some protection, but it is one of those Japanese maples that can really push zone for sun tolerance. It's excellently heat tolerant. Very narrow too. By giving it a little bit more sunlight, you are going to create a more narrow plant in heavy shade. You might want to shape it. You get a little bit more width going on looking for sunlight and heavy shade, but an excellent columnar Japanese maple. It's going to go from a green to a very bright red in the fall, and excellent tree to be growing. Very, very durable, but also very, very columnar.
Underrated on its fall color, like you talked about. It's going to give you some really, really nice shades of red to orange red that are just electric. And this plant is a vigorous plant. It doesn't put a lot of energy into side growth, and so because of that, it shoots straight up. I mean, this is a plant that's going to end up getting to about 10 to 12 feet in 10 years, often more than a foot of growth per year on a Japanese maple. And it's going to be a nice deciduous plant that'll give you some good fall color, but not have a huge canopy.
Yeah, another word of advice, the sunlight helps. Don't top this one. Keep that central leader growing up on your Japanese maples, especially your narrow ones. You'll have a better shape. You know, if you're cutting off any wider branches at a younger age, but keeping a central leader headed up, that's going to give you your best overall shape on this one. Awesome plant. I think you're going to like Sucasa silhouette there in the landscape. The ones we saw at Yutaka Tanaka's place were lightly pruned in late summer to take out some of the width. I always let people know that, but it's an awesome plant, and with minimal pruning, I mean, he has like flagpole shapes on his.
And when we were over there, he was actually the one telling us in Japan they were starting to use Sucasa silhouette as a street tree over there.
Yeah.
And so
we sold some to the city of Hendersonville as street trees. So
yeah, so then we got them to implement them here in Hendersonville, where they've started to plant some Sucasa silhouettes out. Awesome plant for that, but also just a great tree for the landscape and garden, because you can put this tree out in your garden where you don't want a lot of shade, but you can also get some good fall color.
You're going to want this one in your landscape. Mikasa, Sucasa, take this one home with you.
Now, next up, we've got a conifer. This is a cool conifer, Cedrus atlantica fastidiata.
But we did do a video, I believe, just on this one before.
And it's fastigiate, so it makes sense for it being fastidiata. But an amazing evergreen, narrow Cedrus atlantica.
Awesome color here. Again, an evergreen, so you're going to keep that evergreen interest even in the winter months. Tall, narrow conifer for you here. Gets those blue-green shoots to it. Really love it. It actually has some light white coloration into it too, so it almost looks variegated if you get up close on it, but it really brings some great shades of blue.
If you go to a Pigeon Forge, they plant these things everywhere at businesses. And it sort of gives you that mountainous, it gives you that almost ski slope feel.
It gives you a lodge feel.
It gives that lodge feel out there. And they plant these all over Pigeon Forge. Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, you walk around, you'll see lots of the Cedrus atlanticas, the blue atlas cedars, that are just more narrow in their shape. They don't have a lot of wide branching. And that's the Fastidiatis. It's an amazing plant to use out there in the landscape and garden because it doesn't take up a lot of room, but it gives you an evergreen blue interest.
Yeah, a lot of height to it. It fills out fairly quickly, typically over a foot of growth a year on this one.
And you don't get a lot of blue color out of many plants, but you can get that out of some conifers. And this is one that can really give you some blue interest, especially as it gets older.
Oh yeah, pair this with your red Japanese maples, have some lace leaves around this. It's gonna look amazing. It's gonna add vertical interest there in the landscape and year-round color for sure.
Next up, we've got Ilex Kranata sky pencil. It's a narrow Japanese holly.
Awesome plant for Japan. It's getting more commonly in the trade. It's definitely very popular with landscapers for that tall, narrow accent. Fills out very nicely. Not only adds color, but texture there. And it just enters your way into a garden. Oftentimes, there's the columns that you walk by. It says hollies you walk by as you enter into a garden. And it feels like the gates, like you've opened your way and you've walked into a formal garden.
And when Matt and I went to Japan, we had to go visit Mr. Shibamichi. He's the guy who found this plant. And he's sort of like one of the elders in the nursery trade. And everyone always talks about Mr. Shibamichi. So on our last trip to Japan, it was snowing.
Yeah.
And we begged one of our friends, Taka Kobayashi, to take us to go meet Mr. Shibamichi.
It was one of the first times in like the last 50 years it would snowed in November in Tokyo, which was really cool. So we met him there in Tokyo, went out to see Mr. Shibamichi. Really the trip of a lifetime. Very interesting guy and so gracious to us. He was very friendly and just opened his doors and talked so much about different plants. And it's such an honor to get to meet people who've named things that have become, so popular now in the trade. I mean, this is a hit for sure.
Yeah, and this one is a hit for a great reason. It stays very narrow. It's one of those plants that gives you an evergreen interest, but it doesn't get very big.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about this sky pencil, and the name so aptly fits it too. I mean, it's a sky pencil. It goes straight up.
Right.
And it's typically going to be something that gets about 6 to 8 feet in 10 years. So it's not a very quick growing plant, but it's also not one that grows very wide. It's only like 2 foot in that same time frame.
You mentioned the Hopewood video. Definitely go check out our MrMaple Clips channel. We have a clip just of that one segment with Tim talking about this one. Oftentimes we'll add small clip content on there, and it's a great way to get some short content about MrMaple, but subscribe over there. There's some good stuff going on.
And he used this as like an entrance way to his back patio. And that was a great way to sort of introduce his formal, almost Japanese influenced garden right there at his back door.
So next up, we've got one of the tallest ones on the table. You can see these 3 gallons are massive. We have liquid ambar, slender silhouette. Now this is a fast growing, very narrow plant.
I love this plant selection by our friend Don Shadow. It's actually the reason why the name slender silhouette also got added to sucasa, was because this one already had that narrow shape. And this is probably the quickest narrow growing plant we've got here on the table.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for this one to put on over 2 feet of growth a year once it's established. That first year you get a lot of root growth, and after that they tend to really take off. Very, very narrow. It's distinctly a narrow, thin sweet gum. Some great fall colors on this one too. It can get golden yellows to oranges in that fall color. A lot of people will send us sweet gums and say, hey, what maple is this? And we're like, no, that's slender silhouette. I know exactly the plant you're talking about. So we get asked about this one a lot, being maple guys. But an awesome tree to add to your landscape, especially for speed of height. If you want some columnar plants quick, think about the slender silhouette. It's going to go out and really fill out nicely and give you a very regal, almost monument-like feel in the landscape because of that narrow presence.
Exactly. And this is a tree that will get about 25 feet in 10 years. I mean, so it stays really, really narrow and fills out in that narrow shape like you're talking about.
Right.
I mean, we're talking 3-4 feet in width, extremely narrow, but a tremendous size and a tremendous height. It's a plant that's great for English formal gardens to have as like an entranceway. They've got some out at the North Carolina Arboretum as specimen plants, because this plant stands out, grabs your attention, and it just adds to a garden without taking away from the garden.
I love it near driveways. I saw a really interesting thing done with these. We were at Michael Steinhardt's garden, and he had probably pairings of 20 of these done as screening plants. And it really was unique. I mean, he planted them very close together, but it made a large screening plant that was, I mean, they were probably 40 feet tall at that point, some very old, mature ones, but he'd planted them very close together, and you had these just growing columns, but also these rows of growing columns. It was very cool to see.
He also had like a mass planting of them where they were just not planted in a row, but planted just in a grouping. And it was such a unique way to grow this and added a different interest you don't see grown with many plants. Awesome, awesome plant. I also have seen this lining walkways. And you know, about every 6-7 feet, someone's planted another one. And it gives such a unique way to screen off a garden, to make an entrance to a garden, to line down a border, but also as a specimen.
I mean, they're super durable too, so if you could think of this one as almost street tree durability as well. I like it near driveways and things like that where you want the height of a tree, but you can't necessarily have the width there. Great plant to fill out very, very quickly. I'm probably going to put a row of them at the front of the nursery to kind of have like a little bit of an entrance way there with those two, but awesome plant to be growing. Now, all of these are some columnar selections that will give you some vertical height in your landscape, but not a lot of width. That's why we've selected these 6 trees. There's 6 that we currently have available on our website or are coming soon that are very unique and give you a little bit skinnier presence there in the garden.
Yeah, and the columnar plants are plants that can be used in small spaces. They can be used in so many different ways out there in the garden. And just giving that vertical interest, they provide something unique in just doing that as well.
Right.
It's that texture of that vertical height that you look out there and you see that, and it makes you look from the plant, from the base all the way to the top.
Makes the whole garden larger. Even if you have a small conifer garden or an area with a lot of low lace leaves, adding that height in there immediately draws the eye upward. It makes the entire garden feel more like a room, and it makes the room larger.
That's for sure. And we've got some plants up here that give you some nice evergreen interest, from the Fastidiata, the DeGroot Spire, the Sky Pencil, to ones that can give you good fall color. The Slender Silhouette, that gives you some really nice reds to burgundies in the fall.
And Sucasa Silhouette and the Twombly's Red Sentinel down here are going to have excellent fall color. We've kind of got a good mix of deciduous and evergreen going on here, and a lot of different forms to compare with. But these are some of our favorite columnar plants we're doing here at Mr. Maple. There's some new ones in the works always. We might do a part 2 to this eventually. There's always a lot we're doing here that are more thin and narrow.
What out of these up here, what's your favorite of the group?
Gosh, now that's a hard question. I'd probably say Sucasa Silhouette. I feel really privileged to get to go and visit Sucasa Maple Nursery, and so I'll always have a really dear place in my heart. We were getting off the plane, and Mr. Tanaka said, I'm not going to be able to visit you this trip because I can't provide a translator, and so my heart dropped to my stomach. You know, here's one of the main reasons we were going there. When I was visiting with Yano-san, he was so gracious and said, he wants to meet with you, but he just doesn't have a translator. And I said, oh my gosh, would you message him and let him know, may we come if we provide a translator? So we got a translator that went there with us. We've been a couple times now.
Yeah.
And every time he's been so gracious to sit down and spend several hours with us, describing plants with us. So I'm always going to be very partial to anything from Sucasa Nursery, just for his kindness and time he spent with us.
I remember my heart dropped whenever we got the email that, you know, unfortunately I'm not going to be able to see you. But then when Yano-san told us that it was because he didn't have a translator, it was like, we can fix this. We can fix this. And we got to go visit him, and that was amazing. Amazing to do that. Of this group, it's kind of crazy because I love Sucasa Silhouette because we're good friends with him.
Yeah.
Twombly's Red Sentinel, I love it because of its shape and color.
Right.
But oddly enough, one of the things I like the most out of this, out there in the landscape, is the Cedrus Atlantica Fastidiata. I like that lodge type feel that it brings. I know every time I go to Pigeon Forge or to like a ski lodge or something like that, and you see one of these out there in the garden, it just brings the atmosphere to a different level. It makes it makes you feel like you're somewhere different. You're somewhere outside the box that's really unusual.
Now, if I were picking, that's probably my favorite all-around plant. If I were picking just my favorite shape, I'd probably pick the Slender Silhouette. I like how fast it grows to how narrow it is. Like, I like that massive size of it. I mean, it just looks like, it's like a Washington Monument. I mean, it takes off. You've got the spire there in the garden out of nowhere, and it's just unique. I think it makes a super cool presence. You get next to one that's 40 feet tall, and you're like, well, that's nuts. Look, I mean, it is crazy. It doesn't have to be that big of a tree to be that tall, but very narrow. So
now, in gardens across America, probably the most popular is the Sky Pencil. Yeah, it's probably the smallest of this group, fits in narrow spaces, and it's evergreen. And so that's probably the most popular when it comes to gardening across America. But with our customers, it's probably the Twombly's Red Sentinel.
Let us know in the comments section below, what's your favorite tree we've talked about here today? Which of these 6 columnar trees do you find to be your favorite? And what's your favorite columnar tree overall? Let us know if we didn't talk about your favorite columnar tree. Mention that one in the comment section below as well.
Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with your gardening friends. They may be looking for a columnar tree that they can see here in this video.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.